Hi, everyone, and welcome to God's Plan, Your Part, a podcast where our goal is to read the entire Bible in a year, seeking to understand God's plan of redemption while discovering daily and practically your part in it. Hey, everybody, welcome back to God's Plan, Your Part. We are looking in the book of Habakkuk today. We're studying the very short book of 3 chapters. And a question that's going to kind of guide us today is, what do you do when it seems like everything going on around you is wrong, unjust, wicked, and you're just kind of feeling like the Lord's just sitting on the sidelines watching? So we're going to dig into this a little bit more today. A little bit of a funny haha for you all. Sorry about our episodes being a little behind for today. Ryan had a run-in with some bees.
Listen, my day yesterday was very dumb. So we do like to get these uploaded. Usually they go live at midnight. In the morning. We try to record early in the morning. Literally nothing went according to plan yesterday. So I woke up with kind of a head cold a little bit. So I felt kind of weird about that. So I took some medication for that. And then I thought, well, I'll go out and clean up our shed. And while I was out cleaning up the shed, I got stung by a bee on my leg. I was like, that's weird. And before I knew it, there were bees all around me trying to sting me. So I literally grabbed my son, who's he's 2.
Almost 3, yeah.
And we ran into the house away from all these bees. And while we were running, there were bees in my shirt stinging me. It was horrible. And so I literally ran in the house, threw my shirt on the floor, and there were bees in my shirt. So I was stomping on my shirt. And Jenny comes around the corner and is like, what is going on?
So, yeah, it's because the 3-year-old is screaming. Well, practically
because he was scared because we were running.
His head off. Yeah, so it was crazy.
We were getting swarmed by bees.
All that to say, Ryan took some Benadryl because he is allergic to bees.
I took 2 Benadryl because I am allergic to bees.
And already felt sick on top of it. So
I was afraid it was going to turn into a what's that movie? My Girl or something?
Hitch.
No, not Hitch.
That's when he takes too much Benadryl. His face blows up.
Well, I was thinking the one where the kid gets stung by all the bees and dies.
Oh.
That's actually terrible. It was horrible. We got swarmed by bees, and now the podcast is late. So sincere apologies to you guys.
This is real life coming at you, because the idea is to always get this done before our very excited about life children wake up, and it just didn't happen yesterday. He took our oldest son fishing, so that was kind of cool. They got to do some cool stuff in the morning when we normally podcast, but then got stung by bees. So
literally swarmed, running across the yard, being chased by bees like we were in a Winnie the Pooh movie or something.
Oh man, I shouldn't laugh, but it was.
All right, let's get into. Come on, let's get into this here.
So here we are with Habakkuk, and I don't know about you guys. It just seems like this book kind of falls heavy on my heart because this week / today especially, just look around at all the crazy things that are going on, and it just feels like a lot of sadness and injustice. It's just sad. Even around our world, all the stuff that's happening in Hawaii, these crazy fires, and people are suffering. And I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of other things in our own personal lives where it's just God, what are you doing?
Every individual carries their own whatever it is.
And it just feels like this book really hits that, because Habakkuk is having this conversation back and forth between the Lord and himself. And the book starts out saying, God, how long are you going to do this? How long are we going to yell the word violence, and will you not save, while you just watch this wicked and terrible stuff happening?
So Habakkuk is a really interesting book. One, it's really short. It doesn't seem to address anybody specifically necessarily. However, we do know that he's a prophet around Judah's time. We know that he was prophesying around the time of Jeremiah. It's possible that it was before the exile. It's possible that it was around the time of the exile. But with us kind of reading things in context, I always think the editors could cut together these plans a little bit clearer. It feels like we're jumping around a little bit. But with what we've been reading in Jeremiah, with what we've been reading in 2 Kings, you can tell that the people are not living lives that honor God. And Habakkuk is looking out over the people saying, God, where are you? What are you doing? Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Jeremiah, who is a man of God, is getting thrown into a cistern that may have been a toilet. And there's just widespread punishment for people who are righteous before God, and widespread prosperity for people who are not honoring God.
Yeah.
And so Habakkuk is looking out over this, and he's saying, God, where are you? What are you doing?
I kind of like the Lord's answer, though. It's again in the first chapter in verse number 5. It says, "For I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told." So it's kind of interesting. I don't know that we've ever heard
prophecy conversations before, like between the prophet and God.
It's kind of a back and
very
forth.
unique, but I really appreciated that verse because I've actually heard it said before, like if you knew the scope of your life, you wouldn't be able to handle it, and like our pathetic little human minds could not handle God's entire plan if not broken into like moment by moment by moment. Like he knows what's going to happen, and I think he's kind of saying this too. Like I have a plan in mind, and like you wouldn't even believe it if I told you.
Well, and that's not a hard sell. Like Habakkuk is receiving this. I see him saying like, yeah, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
It's very hard to believe, God.
Yeah.
And many of the people who would have been honoring of God or righteous before God in this time would have felt the same way. Like, really, God? You're really doing a work right now? And they do, like, Habakkuk shows that he is choosing to be faithful. But the nature of what he's writing and what he's speaking to God is like, hey, what is this? What are you doing?
So I feel like for me, a practical way to think of this is like any like epic movie that I've ever watched. Like, for instance, I love the Harry Potter movies. I love the Lord of the Rings movies. They're excellent for me.
The devil. Just
they are
super
nerdy. But I think oftentimes cinema specifically tries to reflect like what God does. Like the thing that like makes absolutely no sense of how it's going to happen. Like if you knew all the steps that had to happen in order for Jesus to come and to be resurrected, no one would believe that. And like this is way before this is happening. Like Jesus is coming to the scene, but like all the crazy parts of movies that if you given all the details beforehand, the characters would have been like, yeah, right, that's never ever going to happen. That's crazy. Just like in these stories, like God is allowing the Chaldeans to like take over everything, and
that's the Babylonians, in case you're not tracking, but yeah.
But they're specifically called out. That's why I mentioned them. But like they're coming, they're destroying, they're taking away, and like it makes no sense that at some point they will be delivered from this exile, and that all of these people will be punished for their crimes as well. So like that's an interesting.
Well, the other weird part of this whole scenario is that it's such a long game, because the people of Judah, where Habakkuk is, like they're going to be judged by the Babylonians, by the Chaldeans. So it's going to appear as though the Chaldeans are being used by God. Actually, God is calling Nebuchadnezzar his servant. So they are being used by God, but they're not righteous people either. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of chapter 2 is about basically like, woe to you people that build cities based on blood and built on blood, because you will receive violence out of your violence. Chapter 2, verse 8, because you have plundered many nations, all the remnant of the peoples shall plunder you, for the blood of man and the violence to the earth, to cities and to all who dwell in them. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, to set his nest on high, to be safe from the reach of harm. So even Babylon coming in and taking over Judah, which we saw happen actually yesterday, they are still not going to be safe from what the Lord is doing. And the Lord is going to judge them as well, because they're not righteous.
Mm-hmm. So I guess my biggest takeaway then, I mean, did you want to add anything else from 3 at all? I mean, I know that you said, before we started this, hold on, before we even started this episode, Ryan was like, oh, Habakkuk, I know what this is about.
I used to have these verses on my marker board in my office, because I think they're really powerful verses. And it was funny because whenever people would come in my office, they'd be like, oh, that's that's a good verse, but like, why do you have it there? Like it almost like begs like, oh,
which verse are you talking
what's going on in your life? So chapter 3, verse 17, I think it's incredibly powerful. Though the fig should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. So that's dark. Like it
there's nothing.
Yeah, in my mind, I just imagine like looking over Judah after the people have been carried off into exile. There's literally burning buildings, knocked down towers, and nothing. And so it's, hey, I look out my window and there's nothing there. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. So I just like... He paints a very dark picture, and he says, even when I'm surrounded by dark things, I will rejoice in the Lord because my strength is not in those things.
Yeah.
My strength is in the Lord. So I think it's really powerful. It always makes people look at me and say, what's going on in your life, Ryan? I just really like those verses.
But I think that actually, like, that helps us also, because I find myself thinking that often when I'm thinking about these current events of, like, really crazy things. They're just like, oh my gosh, like, this is happening to people. Like, the beginning of the book really, I think, hones in on that. Like, God, how is this still happening on your watch? But then towards the end of the book, Habakkuk kind of like, he pivots and he changes his perspective in that, like, okay, like, I get it. There's going to be bad stuff here, but I trust you. I know that, like, everything is for your glory and that you will always come out on top because you are God and you are sovereign and you're in charge. So I think it changes our perspective from God, why do you do all this, to a perspective of, I trust that what you're doing is right and what you're doing is sovereign and I trust you.
Even when the details of my life seem messed up, even when the details of my community, my nation, my world feels off, God is still in control. So we opened up the top of the episode before we got into my shenanigans with bees about, like, what do you do when you look around and you see evil people prospering and you wonder, God, why do you let this happen? Well, to some degree, like, God doesn't exist to make your life perfect and wonderful. And so what we do is we serve the Lord. We trust that the Lord is sovereign. We trust that we can find security and hope in him. And even when we look around and things are not right, we can have faith that God is in control. And that's what I think is that powerful piece in chapter 3, verse 17 and 18. Go read it for yourself. You gotta look at those words in a Bible and see what it says for yourself. And basically, sort of unapologetically, what the Bible seems to say is, like, yeah, you trust in the Lord even when terrible things happen. And we still with care and compassion and mercy and grace, like, we are the hands and feet of Jesus. We care for the people around us. We're not irreverent towards people. We don't just shut ourselves off. We need to reach out. We need to care for people. But God is sovereign. He's in control, and we can trust him because he is a good God who loves us. We'll be back again tomorrow, hopefully, if I don't take some Benadryl tonight. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.